Macmillan Audio presents
The Great Reformer by Austen Ivereigh.
read for you by the author.
Prologue. This book came out of a minute's meeting with Pope Francis in St. Peter's Square in June 2013. My colleague and I had been given sought-after front-row tickets at the Wednesday audience, when there is the chance to speak to the Pope as he moves along the row chatting briefly to delegates and guests. He took over 2 hours to reach us, because after his address, the usual mix of homespun humour and startling metaphors, he disappeared for what seemed like an eternity among the ones he calls God's holy faithful people. They, the Anawim, the poor of God, not we, the front-row ticket holders, were his priority. It was a sun-struck day, and the exertion had taken its toll. By the time he got to us, Francis, at that point 76 years old, was sweating, hot and breathless. But what most struck me was the energy he gave off, a biblical blend of serenity and playful joy. The Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, put it well after he met Francis some days later. The Argentine Pope, he said, is an extraordinary humanity, on fire with Christ. If joy were a flame, you'd need to be made of asbestos not to get burnt. Francis had fascinated me more and more since the rainy night of his election on March 13th, 2013. I was up on a TV platform overlooking St. Peter's Square, conducting minute-by-minute commentary for a British news channel. It had been an hour since the white smoke, and we were waiting with the Globe's media for the twitch on the balcony curtains. Some minutes before Cardinal Jean-Louis Tauran came out to announce the new Pope, I had a tip-off from my old boss, the retired Archbishop of Westminster, Cardinal Cormac Murphy O'Connor, who had taken part in the pre-conclave discussions, but was too old to take part in the conclave itself. He told my emissary that, as it had been a short conclave, the new Pope could well be Jorge Mario Bergoglio. Bergoglio? It was a name from the past. I knew his country. It began with parakeets in hot, humid rainforests, continued in vast herds of cattle and horses in great prairies between the mountains and the ocean, and ended with penguins on ice floes floating past spouting whales. It had once been a wealthy nation, one that saw itself as an outpost of Europe stranded in Latin America. Later it was a textbook study in failed promise, a warning of how deep-rooted political polarities can paralyze society. I recalled a trip to Argentina in 2002 to write an article about the country's economic collapse, when people spoke highly of their aloof and austere cardinal. But also further back to the early 1990s, when I had lived in Buenos Aires while researching a doctoral thesis on the church and politics in Argentine history. Over a number of visits, in the midst of attempted coup and currency crises, I had come to love that beguiling city, and living there for many months at a time, my Spanish had sprouted the inflections and idioms of porteño Spanish. It was all, as W. H. Hudson titled his memoir of Argentina, far away and long ago. Now Bergoglio had brought it back. I had another memory of the April 2005 conclave that had elected Benedict XVI, when I had been in Rome with Cardinal Murphy O'Connor. Some cardinals had been making a bid to find a pastoral alternative to Joseph Ratzinger and were looking to Latin America, the Church's new hope. A few months later, an anonymous cardinal's secret diary revealed that Bergoglio of Buenos Aires had been the other main contender in that election. But after that, he had seemed to fade, to the point where almost nobody in 2013 thought he was papabile. That's why I was so glad of that tip-off. The Argentine cardinal hadn't been on my list or almost anybody's. At least when the balcony curtains finally opened and the new pope was announced, I could say who it was and something about him. It didn't go so well for some commentators on other channels. Afterward, the consensus seemed to be that Bergoglio had just emerged, that there had been no group of cardinals working for his election. But if that was so, why did my old boss seem so sure before the conclave that it would be him? I sensed there was more, that Bergoglio had not faded at all, but had simply been invisible to our Eurocentric radar, and that there had been a group organising his election. But that wasn't my main curiosity.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?